Welcome to the SGV Master Key, a show where you will hear personal stories of triumph over failures and how others successfully navigated the unique landscape that is the San Gabriel Valley. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we have chosen the San Gabriel Valley for our home or businesses or both. We believe it is the people and small businesses that make this community great, and we love to share their stories with you. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at sgvmasterkey.com. Here are the hosts for the show, Russell Mono and Scott Warmoth.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the SGV Master Key podcast. I'm your host, Russell.
And I'm Scott.
Today we have a very special guest, Rob Ha. He is a senior member of the technical staff at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one of the icons in the San Gabriel Valley, and also a Interplanetary Navigator. So welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
Rob, what is your connection to the San Gabriel Valley?
Well, the main one is, you just mentioned it. I'm an engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It was frankly a job of my dreams, kind of something I yearned for from a young lad. You know, growing up in the sort of the early space age, those missions into space, and so that was just something that really excited me.
Are you from the San Gabriel Valley?
No, I grew up in British Columbia, Canada.
Oh, Canadian.
Yes,
my wife is Canadian.
Yeah.
So when did you come here?
After working Stanford, going to university, and after I got my degree from Stanford, and I came here.
And did I catch that right? Your dream was always to work at JPL and
in a general sense, sort of. I wanted to be involved in the space business, and JPL was on the top of that heap. So yes, JPL was very much an icon in that field.
So in terms of space, I think of Florida, Texas, and JPL. I mean, it's all kind of, NASA is in those three locations, right?
Oh, at least those three. There's many more. There's roughly a dozen NASA centers scattered around the country. There's another one here in California, up in the Bay Area, in Mountain View, California, called Ames.
Are you affiliated with NASA or and JPL? How is JPL set up exactly?
Yeah, so it's a little different than most of the NASA centers. So JPL is actually a contractor to NASA. So NASA pays the bills, but we're actually not civil servants. We're actually employees of Caltech. So JPL is a laboratory of Caltech in an official sense.
Okay.
But NASA pays all the bills. NASA pays for all the structures and the buildings and the facilities at the JPL, where the JPL is located. But officially, we actually get paid through Caltech.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's built for NASA, but it's a Caltech organization or laboratory.
Yes. So the director of JPL, who of course interacts with NASA all the time, is actually a vice president of Caltech, one of the vice presidents of Caltech.
Okay. I've known Rob for 25 years, actually, since our children grew up together. But I have been fascinated and really looking forward to this conversation because at least once or twice a year we meet together and we talk about things that are way beyond my ability to understand, but certainly you can describe it very well to a layman like myself. But just, it's so fascinating to learn about how rocket ships work and how you send them into orbit. And you deal mainly with just the Milky Way, or the what system are you?
Oh no, JPL's mandate is to explore the solar system.
Okay.
The solar system is still plenty big enough, right? It can go out to 30, 35 AU. An AU is an astronomical unit, which is, it's a fancy term for just the distance from the Earth to the Sun. So you just take that sort of radius and you multiply it by 30 more times, and that sort of is the size, the radius, make it 60 AU. It's the diameter of all the planets that orbit the Sun. So within that sort of length. I mean, that doesn't mean too much, right? See, that sort of number, but it takes light, about 8 hours to get from the Sun to the outermost pseudo-planet. So Pluto used to be called a planet. It's no longer a planet, but it's what we think of as the outermost part of the solar system.
So it would take 8 hours for light to get from the Sun to Pluto.
Yeah.
How about to Earth?
I think I got that number approximately right.
How about to Earth?
8 minutes.
8 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we could just multiply it by 30, right? 30 times 8, 240. So it's not even quite that. It's more like 4 hours.
Okay.
Sorry, 8 hours is the round trip light time.
Okay.
Back and forth.
All right.
The Sun is 93 million miles from us?
Yeah. So distance-wise, 93 million miles. It's like 8 light minutes.
So if I could back up a little bit, I'm interested in young Rob, and how did you develop this passion to explore the universe?
Well, just growing up in that particular time, we see a lot on the news about the space race and NASA shooting off astronauts into space. So it was the Mercury program, the Gemini program, the Apollo program, which got me really excited in a general sense. But I didn't grow up in an educated family. I was the first person in my extended family to go to university. But I was very excited, very receptive, and I kind of was, because of space being where it is, I was sort of interested in astronomy. I'd picked that up. And I had the great fortune to meet a couple of classmates when I went to middle school, when I got to middle school, who were already very much involved in astronomy. And they were already twirling their telescopes around and looking at stars and planets. And so I got very much involved with them. And by the time I graduated from high school, I had already ground my own mirror to make a telescope, sort of a handmade telescope, and built my own telescope.
Wow. And you said you went to Stanford, right?
Yes.
What did you study at Stanford?
I studied astronautics. Wow. So layered on top of my love of science, I would say, is a love of adventure. And I've come to see that now, just sort of an aside, I've come to see that actually, given the correct, maybe curiosity levels also, as that love of adventure is very much in parallel with love of science. I mean, science is actually the ultimate adventure. I mean, many people may confuse science as sort of homework problems in high school and just doing these things, and it's kind of laborious and tedious. But real science is just about an investigation. And it's like how the mysteries of the world, the universe, the galaxy are revealed. But the voyagers, the investigators, the scientists that are on this voyage, they don't know what's around the next bend. And they're learning, and they're using the scientific method to reveal the answers to these mysteries that we've had for such a long time. Now, we're all kind of blasé about that because everything seems to be known. We live in this very complicated, sophisticated society. But science still goes on. It's still pushing out in these other regimes. So anyways, I just mentioned that. And so I find that this love of adventure, so I decided, I had the opportunity when I was an undergraduate at the University of British Columbia to participate in an exchange program in the University of Hawaii.
Oh.
And I thought, yeah. At the time, so this is many years ago. And so I did that. And I went, and I so thoroughly enjoyed it. I stayed there for 5 years, and then I moved on from there to Stanford. And so I've had this excitement of adventure and scientific investigation my entire life. So that's kind of what makes me tick, I guess, if that's what you're asking.
But scientific adventure, it could extend to outer space. It could be oceans. It could be material.
Yes.
It could be anything.
Absolutely. It's not.
Are you able to like look at all of those areas of science, or do you focus in on just a few things, or just one area that is really your favorite? You know.
Oh yeah. No. I'm certainly. I mean, you have to become an expert in your field. It's like everything, right? It's more sophisticated, and so in order to contribute something in each of these fields, you have to become quite an expert in those fields. So, say in biology, there are certainly new things to learn in biology, but I'm not a biologist, so I can read and understand the process that's going on when investigators are looking at certain fields within biology, but I don't contribute to that in any meaningful sense. I'm just sort of I just read about results that come through. But the real important point is the scientific method is consistent across all of those methods. So the way that they go about learning these new, understanding these new mysteries, or learning these new revelations, if you will, that is consistent. So it's from astronomy, from the oceans to space, down to the ground, geology, biology, all of these. That's all following the scientific method.
What is your passion right now?
I spent several summers when putting myself through university. I was also lucky enough to find a job working that I could support myself just from summertime employment, and that was with the Forest Service. And this sounds like what's he going on about now, but the point was that I was able to support myself in this job that took me out of the city, and this is the kind of job no one really knew much about at the time, but now you see it all the time in the news. These guys, right? Mm-hmm. So I was fighting fires. I was a crew boss fighting these fires, but on quiet times, which was most of the time, we had the entire province of British Columbia around us. And I just developed a real deep love of nature at sort of the environmentalist level. And so that has also stayed with me, sort of not an environmentalist as more of a stewardship, okay, a conservatorship of we have such beauty around us, okay, all around the world. That was just my experience at the time, right? And so what's very important to me now is that stewardship element of what we can all do to help preserve a livable planet, because it's going.
You talk about the beauty of nature, the stewardship, preservation, but what we really see right now is just a lot of negative, very bad stuff happening, fires and viruses, and how do you reconcile this? And what are we going to do in the future? Because I read that the acreage of fires burning right now in California is maybe 10 times more than has ever been in history. First off, does that even sound like it's true? And second, how do we address that?
Well, there is a lot more land burning. Yes, that's true, and it's been going up. The trend has been up over the last several decades. The way we have to address it is with essentially a long slog. There's not going to be any single magic bullet to solve this, but we do have to, I think it's like an alcoholic. We first of all have to acknowledge that there is a problem, and that we're all contributing to this. And then we have to say, okay, well then what is the solution? What must we do? And you hear various elements of this on the news. I think if there's something you've heard, several Democratic politicians talk about the Green New Deal. Maybe that's a particular vision of what needs to happen. I don't strongly advocate that right now. I think what we need to do as a first step, and then we can look at second steps after that, is to put a price on carbon, is what it's called, right? I mean, we need to put a tax on carbon, on all fossil fuels that are used by us. I mean, and that means prices will go up. It's a situation that humanity has never found itself in, right? It's like, why should I bother to take any effort now to make things easier for someone living, in the future, 20, 30 years from now? But there are solutions, innovative solutions, when I'm saying that this price on carbon. There's ways where, yes, you can make gasoline more expensive. But when you make it more expensive, that tax, or just call it a fee, that can actually be collected and not just disappear into the coffers of the government, but actually rebated back to everybody. So it's kind of like, okay, if you're smart and you want to game the system, there will be this higher fossil fuel price, but if you get money back, if you're getting money back, 100% of that, okay, so all this money gets collected by the government, and then every month a check comes back to people, right? If you want to really be smart about it, you can say, well, hey, all I need to do is stop burning fossil fuels. I'll still get this money back, and I'll come out ahead. So there's like, these are like innovative systems that, that people haven't even really started to think about yet. But they are ways that we can still profit and keep ahead of and still do well, but address the very big evil that's in our midst right now, which is fossil fuel burning.
So that is the biggest problem that you see facing humanity right now?
Well, it's certainly one of them. I mean, there are many. There's just...
It's funny, right? Because when I get into a conversation with Rob, I feel I start to talk about like big things, and like, because the universe is this big, and like there should be one big answer to everything, but of course there isn't, and it's kind of sloppy thinking on my part. But what if we try to break it down? Like, what would a tax on carbon, what does that actually mean? How would it be done?
Well, so an organization that I'm part of has a plan in that regard, and it actually has a legislation in Congress right now that would do what it is proposing. And so the idea is you just have you put a 10. Let's just refer to gasoline. I mean, of course, there's lots of things that use fossil fuels, but gasoline is quite common, right? You just start off putting a 10 cent a gallon increase on the price of gasoline in 1 year. And then the next year it goes up another 10 cents. And the next year after that goes up another 10 cents. Not big increases, okay? I mean, we see fluctuations on the order of $1 a gallon in that, over a span of 6-10 months, right? We've seen that. But over 10 years, this would be $1 a gallon more, right? And anyways, that money, that tax would, as I mentioned, would get collected, go into a trust fund, and then get rebated to people, everybody in the country, everybody with a social security number, in equal sized check. So no calculation involved, just everybody gets the same check. So that's what I'm saying is you get a check back. If you're smart, you would just say, okay, so the check that comes back would kind of balance the higher gas price, right? But if you decide to take the bus, ride a bike, buy an EV, then you're still getting this check back and you're not paying that higher gas. that kind of idea.
You're netting money.
Yeah, you're coming forward. And also the feature that is attractive to the vast majority of Americans in this plan, like 2/3 or even more, but solidly 2/3, is that there's a very small segment of society, like the top 1% or top 5%, that uses an extraordinary amount of fossil fuels. So actually, they would be paying an awful lot of money in this towards these fees, right? And so the way that works out numerically is this 2/3, and at least 2/3, even a little bit more, they would come out ahead even without doing anything. Okay, the size of the check that would come back to them. Remember, the size of the check is equal for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. But in their lives, right, the size of this check would actually keep them ahead. They would get more money back than they would be spending, even if they're still driving a pickup truck or their old Dodge or something. Okay, they could be even further ahead if, as I said, they decided to, buy a used EV or take the bus or ride a bike or something like that. Okay, so these are complicated ideas here for just a social chat. Mm-hmm. I don't mean to be going on about that. Just trying to respond to your question, Scott.
No, that's okay.
I'm just saying that rather than just sort of flipping it off and saying, "Oh no, I don't want to do that. That's going to be too expensive." The carbon tax. There's a workable way to solve this problem.
I'm really interested in the object that you brought, and I'm also interested in what an interplanetary navigator does. So can you go into the Interplanetary Navigator first? What is that? What do you do?
Well, Scott was mentioning earlier on how difficult it was when you launch a rocket and it goes somewhere, right? So if you want to send a spacecraft or people to Mars, then you have to figure out exactly, and it's hundreds of millions, tens of millions of miles away. It takes 6 months at least to get there with the rockets we have now. So we have to calculate that path, because not only do you have to sort of calculate how to get there, but Mars is also moving. So it's a moving target. And if you miss Mars by just, not more than a half an hour over a 6 month, maybe 8 month long voyage, then Mars will have already whisked by, and you'll just see its dust, so to speak, right? You just sort of wave by, and you'll miss the planet. You won't do the rendezvous.
That is so fascinating. So you have to be within 1 second.
Well,
of hitting it.
Not
right?
quite a second, but within a half an hour is too big a margin. You have to be within tens of minutes.
And that is a 6 month journey, and you have to know exactly when to send the rocket. I mean,
and it matters when you leave from Earth, because Earth has to be in the right position too. Okay, so every 2 years, and we're just seeing it this summer. This past summer, there were several launches to Mars. The United Arab Emirates sent a spacecraft to Mars. China sent a spacecraft to Mars, and now JPL has sent a spacecraft to Mars, and they all happened in last month, because that's when Earth is in the best position to be, so that is 6 to 8 months from now, Mars will then be up sort of closest to where Earth is. If you draw circles to an inner and outer circle, right? Earth is sort of up at the 12 o'clock position, you might say, on a clock. Uh-huh. And then in 6 to 8 months, Mars will be up at the 12 o'clock position.
And that only happens every 2 years.
Yeah, it only aligns like that roughly every 2 years.
And then you have to even calculate then, like how to get into orbit or out of orbit, or how does all that work?
It's a three-dimensional problem for one. So there's up and down and sideways and forward. Right?
Yeah.
So it's Newtonian physics, And if once you understand that and you just apply it in all the details that are involved, then you can make these calculations. It does get complicated because we do have nine planets and the sun, all of them exerting a gravitational tug, and so there are these slight tugs in space. So we don't we have no experience of that on Earth because we're tugged all the time down on the ground, right? Gravity is pulling us down on the surface. But out in space, just the slightest little tug will pull you off somewhere because, well, if there's nothing there and then all of a sudden there's a little tug, you would go where the little tug is pulling you. And so there's these little gravitational attractions from all the planets, right? It's not just one, and they're constantly. It's a big symphony of tugs, and so you have to negotiate your way through those. And so you make the calculations, as I said, with Newtonian physics, and you can also apply relativistic physics as a second layer of finer detail. And that's how you arrive at Mars.
So you have to, of course, Mars is in the solar system, so you don't have to leave the solar system. But you have to plan out almost every inch of the journey before.
Even before you go, we have a plan.
Yeah.
And we make a calculation of if everything was perfect, how it would travel and reach Mars.
And if it's not perfect, what do you do?
Well, it's never perfect. Okay. So we have thrusters on the space. We always have thrusters, little rockets.
Uh-huh.
All right. And so we apply, and that's a very important part of my job is figuring out where it is. So I said we have this plan, right? We have the plan. I call it a reference. And then if you're not on that reference, you want to get back to it, right? So it's very important to determine just how far off the reference you are, and then to pull you back on. So we use thrusters, little rockets, to make those adjustments. I mean, I mentioned nothing's ever perfect. This latest, most sophisticated mission that JPL has ever produced, this launched in July, I said, end of July, called Mars 2020. But it's already had problems. So it's just been in space now for just around a month, a little less than a month. And it's already had 3 problems.
And you've overcome them.
Yeah, they've been overcome.
Do you monitor the flights from the other 2 flights that went up in July? Do you also track those?
We are helping at some level with the United Arab Emirates one. Because of the current situation with our governments around the world, NASA is not involved with the Chinese mission at all.
Could you describe for our listeners, what does the room look like that you work in? I only envision, what I see in movies. Maybe there's a huge wall, with chalk all over it. What is it like at work for you?
There was a movie a few years ago called The Martian, and the actual grounds that the so-called facility that they called JPL that was not JPL. So the outside, it looks sort of like an enormously sophisticated architectural creation. That wasn't JPL. But inside, in that movie, it was fairly similar to what we see. There are rooms with many people in them, in front of computer screens, and then there are rooms where people are just in their office, and they'll just have their own computer and monitor, and sometimes they'll be making calculations there. So when we're making plans, as I mentioned, plans before launch, people will just be in their office and working on a computer. Usually on launch, there will be a room where many people gather. Maybe 70, 80 people all in front of consoles, something like what you've seen maybe on TV, and very large monitors high up at the end of the room to facilitate understanding of just what's going on at that time. That usually happens in critical events when something really important happens. Much of the time it's quiescent, right? You're on the plan, or you're very close to the plan, and you're just following it. And in those times, people just sort of stand down from these large rooms and just go back and just work from their office. I mean, people are doing that now from home, right?
The Mars rover, you actually had that at JPL. You built it there, right?
Yes, several now. Two rovers have been built. More than two.
So you were you directly involved in the building of those?
No. So I'm as I mentioned, an interplanetary navigator.
Okay.
So I'm more of an applied mathematician. So the building the rover is a hands-on mechanical and electrical engineering job.
Yeah. Okay.
So those are very interesting. It's fascinating jobs. Just
but you had to get that rover to Mars. That was your job.
Right. Our job is to take that job and send it from surface of the Earth all the way to the surface of Mars safely.
Yeah. The one other thing I was going to say is you wonder what would happen. How would Einstein communicate with Einstein, this number two, right? But anyway, Rob's son is a PhD from Caltech, right?
Yes.
In physics.
Yes.
And as I said, I've known Rob and his family for 25 years. And so I have been in your house, and where, let's say, many people might have a whiteboard in their living room or in their kitchen or dining room to track, take the dog out. But what I saw on your whiteboard was mathematical or scientific equations that I couldn't begin to read. But it was just like part of your daily life, right?
Yeah, I was just trying to explain one problem to other people in the room in the kitchen at the time. Just the best way to explain it is usually with equations for those people that know that language.
Right. So it would be E equals MC squared, but like 50 times as long. So that's inside a rocket scientist's home.
I haven't seen The Martian, but I have seen Hidden Figures. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Is that similar to what you do? What they portray in that movie?
Well, I'm not sure if that's a trick question, because there was some racism involved in that film.
Oh, no. No, not that part. The mathematical part.
Yes. I mean, those women were working for engineers who, I didn't actually know this, who were so lazy they didn't even want to make the calculations themselves, and they just gave them to those women to do. But yes, those engineers in that is similar to the job that I do and my colleagues.
I see. Can we get to the object?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. That's right.
I'm really dying to know. So for our listeners, I want to describe it. I don't even know how. There's a stand specific for it. It's red, and there's a sphere on the bottom and maybe a 6-inch cylinder coming out of it. I have no idea what it is. So Rob, if you could.
Yes, I will. Well, Russell and Scott asked me to bring some small object that with me today that was somehow important to me, and this is a telescope. It's a very small telescope. It's the most portable telescope. I mean, most telescopes can be not very portable because they have tripods, and just like many of these stands around me right now, but even larger. But this is a very simple Dobsonian, small 4-inch telescope. It's Dobsonian just because you can just rotate it around on this stand. You see that? It just kind of, but it's very portable. It's easy to carry around. So I brought this telescope just more or less as a proxy for how important astronomy and science has been to me ever since I was a lad. And I mentioned I built my own telescope when I was younger, and I've led astronomy clubs, and I've through the years various places when I was living in near Stanford and at JPL. So it's a fascinating science. I really find it exciting, but it's been very crucial, very influential in my direction because of astronomy and what it has brought my love of science and how understanding of the scientific method. And so that's why I brought this. And
it's a Dobsonian?
It's called, well, yes, that's the technical term for how it is directed, how it's aimed, if you might say, right? There are telescopes that are called they're on equatorial mounts. Those are these very large telescopes. If you go to an observatory, these are massive telescopes, and you just sort of you'll see these large metal or concrete piers or arms holding the tube on place. That's because the structure around it tries to simulate the where the Earth is in space. So one of those parts of the structure kind of is parallel to the Earth's equator. The other arm, if you will, around the telescope is aligned with the North Pole of the Earth, so that when you come to orient the telescope, it's sort of easy in the sense that, well, the Earth is spinning this way anyways, and here I am sitting looking through an eyepiece. I can just sort of adjust it very easily along with the way the Earth's going anyways. And you can mechanize it and put a clock drive on. So there's clocks, just moves it for you. So that rather than, because the Earth turns, rather than just looking at it, and so you can keep the telescope aimed at a star, and it won't drift out of the field of view because the Earth is turning. The Dobsonian doesn't have all that complicated, heavy attachments. It's very simple to carry around. But on this telescope, if you aimed it and you're looking, say, at Jupiter at night, through here, take this. Oops, take the lid off, and that's where the light would come through here. It would, and the eyepiece goes in there, but it would, because the Earth is turning. If you just didn't do anything, it would drift out of the field of view within a minute or so. And so you could nudge it if you get really good at this. You just nudge it in the right direction, but it's kind of hard sometimes to know exactly which way to nudge it because it's dark at night. You're not sure exactly which way the North Pole is. By exact, I mean to a very high precision, right? So it's a harder to follow, and you have to constantly do this, constantly nudge it.
I see.
How powerful is this?
This is a 4-inch. It's not very large. So I brought the eyepiece. Here's an eyepiece that goes.
Oh, okay.
It goes in that in the end of. In here, right?
So if you wanted to watch or look at, let's say, the space station as it passes by, could you see it very well?
You could, theoretically, but it would move very fast. You'd be far better off looking at the space station through binoculars.
Oh.
Because binoculars have the space station would just zip right by in this 4-inch aperture when you're looking.
You could see features on the moon.
But you can see features on the moon. You can see the moons of Jupiter and Saturn.
Oh,
through this, barely. It's 4 inches is not very big, but you can see. In fact, just last week I was up in Northern California. Talk about slipping through. Just before the fires started, we were up in a desert location to the east of Mammoth Lakes, and beautiful dark skies, just delightful. And we took this with us just because it was so portable, and we could see the moons of Jupiter and the rings of Saturn through there. It was very beautiful.
So Rob, thank you for bringing this. I'm really glad that you brought this, and now that I know that it is, I'd like to go into a little bit about some struggles that you may have endured or overcome in either your personal life or your professional life, or both. Something that you may feel comfortable sharing with our listeners.
So I've described how have this love of science and liked astronomy, and the space age excited me. My parents had not gone to university. They had no surplus money. They really didn't have the means to support me going on to higher education. So I was able to earn an entrance scholarship in my first year of university, so it paid for my tuition then, but it didn't pay for my living costs. And in subsequent years, the rest of my university years, I just put myself through college. So that was quite a significant obstacle. Was always finding the means to be able to get through the next year and subsequent years. So it was meaningful enough to me that I wanted to do it, and I worked pretty hard to do that. And so I described some of the jobs I took in order to accomplish that. So I'm happy that it worked out. I was able to get my degrees, and so I'm very, very happy with that. I've actually been able to live the dream I had.
At Stanford, how could you pay for that? Did you need to take out loans? I would imagine that's not a cheap place to go to school.
I received an assistantship at Stanford, so I was working as a research assistant at Stanford, and when you have an assistantship like that, they pay for your tuition.
Compare the time you went to school and today. Would you expect that your kids could do the same thing that you did?
I don't think so. I think times have changed. It's more difficult to. Theoretically, it's probably possible, but I think just in the milieu that I'm part of now, here in Southern California, being able to put yourself through a university education program is fund yourself, is hard to find jobs like that.
Your first son, of course, has already obtained his PhD, and your second son is still at UBC, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's a senior.
I found growing up I didn't grow up in the Pasadena area, but my children grew up in the Pasadena area, and the resources and the education level of this area is just incredibly high compared to most places in the country and world.
Yeah, I would agree. It's almost seems second to none.
Really, Pasadena is a world-class city.
Yeah, I mean they have educational opportunities. I would not say that those are available to everybody, all children growing up. Now that's the unfortunate problem. Is there are other educational opportunities here are incredible, but they're not available to everybody.
And as we know from previous shows and just the way San Gabriel Valley is, there's a lot of immigrant experience here where they don't have the money. They have to grow up in a sort of a different part of the San Gabriel Valley than maybe those who experience Pasadena. I mean, it's very diverse, and it just so happens. I've always thought Pasadena is a world-class city, and we're just so lucky to have the resources that are here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we need more egalitarianism in the education system, though. We need to have more equal opportunities. I mean, there are good schools, but there are even better schools in other parts of, like, in Pasadena. And I think, if we want to keep this enterprise going that we see, like we were just talking about NASA and JPL's accomplishments, we need to have well-educated students coming forth and those that appreciate the accomplishments that come from a good education. If we don't have a good education coming from public schools, then we're going to have a vast second-class, layer of second-class citizens that don't understand that and don't contribute to this society we have going forward.
As a scientist, one, and as a humanist, two, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the human race?
Maybe I should pass on that.
Well,
over a beer sometime, Scott.
let's take a quick break, and then I'd like to get into some advice you may have for people pursuing their dreams in the San Gabriel Valley, and also anything that you would have done differently. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The legal process can be intimidating. You don't know where to start, and you're unsure of what to expect. The attorneys and staff at the law offices of Scott Warmoth have been serving the San Gabriel Valley for over 35 years, helping people just like you navigate through the legal process and ensuring you're treated fairly. You can find them at law888.com or call 626-282-6868. That's 626-282-6868.
All right, and we're back with our guest, Rob. Rob, what would you have done differently in your career path?
This may sound like a cop-out, but there's not a lot I would have done differently. I mean, there's fine details here or there, but I really realized what I wanted to do. I got, it was a kind of a boyhood dream to get involved in space program, and working at JPL has been just a thrilling experience. So, I mean, I guess I wish I had maybe more capabilities as far as my own abilities go. It would have been great to be the Scott mentioned Albert Einstein or somebody like that, but I am who I am, and I'm quite happy that I was able to get to what I have accomplished as of now.
So for our guests who maybe have only heard of JPL is located in Altadena.
It's on in between Altadena and La Cañada, Flint Ridge.
And I've been to the gate where there's security guards and there's a sign there, but is there something of interest to see there for the public? Do they have tours? Or is it just workers and that's it?
No, there is a annual open house. Every year there's an open house. This past year it was canceled. So we all know the drill with regards to that. I don't know when this open house will come again.
Sure.
But yes, the open house is actually so popular. In the past, it's been thronged with visitors, and the lineups have been so long that people have been kind of upset with that. So in the past 2 years, when there were open houses, JPL started selling tickets online, free tickets, no fee, but you needed to get a ticket online, and then that way they could sort of keep a lid on how many visitors were in there, so if you did come to the open house at JPL, it would be a rewarding experience where it wouldn't be like Disneyland where you're spending 3 hours in line.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've had a number of friends who actually work there, and they always describe this hike from the parking lot. Is that accurate?
Well, that's the big sore spot at JPL with almost every employee is the parking. There's several parking lots. Some are further away than others, and so the hike could be further for some people, as describing to you. A parking structure was built 3 or 4 years ago at JPL, so that has helped reduce distance, parking structure near into the lab. But yes, it's near and dear to every JPLer.
What sort of things can the public see on this tour? I've never heard of this tour.
Well, it would show the facilities that Scott and you were mentioning about where engineers sit during these critical events that go on. So you get tours that go in there, and experts, guides, well-versed tour guides that will describe just what you're seeing and what happens there. So there's at least two venues like that. You would go down to another part on the tour is our assembly building, so you could see where the rover was put together, actually constructed. And that rover will be gone. It won't be there now, but there may be some other spacecraft in the near future that will be in that facility. So there's a bay up high with glass windows, and you can just walk through and look down upon it. So it's a pretty good, get a pretty good idea of what's going on. And then there are other. There's films. Sometimes there's always a film that's shown if you wish to sort of welcome to JPL kind of film, describes overall what JPL does and what its mission is. There's several other smaller labs, smaller than these venues I just described, but these are actually laboratories that the tour will take you through, and you sort of can look through a small little viewing window to look in. You can't actually go into these labs, but and they'll describe what they do. I mean, sometimes they're building state-of-the-art devices in many areas at JPL.
Sometimes astronauts are there, I think.
Well, they come sometimes to train on an instrument. If JPL is building an instrument that will go up into the space station, maybe, they will come and perhaps have the instrument builders explain to them some of the details of the instrument. But generally, we don't get too many astronauts coming to JPL other than perhaps just for PR purposes.
I think I read recently that a design for a respirator at JPL was approved for production. Is that correct?
Yes. So right after the COVID lockdown started, JPL devoted some resources and some of the engineers and facilities were making respirators.
Nice.
So the SGV-3, what are the three places, experiences that come to mind for you when you think of the San Gabriel Valley?
Okay, I thought of some that I thought that I really enjoy that are here, activities that are, for instance. So one of them is hiking up to Henniger Flats. Mm. So this is a hike that starts at there's a county park called Eaton Canyon County Park, and you can and then the trail leads from the end of the park and climbs up an old toll road up to what is now a forestry facility up in Henniger Flats. So I really enjoy that. It's a tremendous view of the valley on the way up and way down, and from Henniger Flats too. There's also a little campsite up there. So if you wanted to a backpacking campsite that you like, Boy Scouts use that.
So how often do you make that hike?
I actually haven't done it in the last 6 months, just because of the way things are. Mm-hmm. I should maybe get out there. I would usually go maybe a couple times a month before that.
How long?
Oh, sorry.
How long is that hike for you?
It's 3 miles.
Do you go from the nature center, or do you go from Crescent Drive?
I go from Crescent Drive.
Okay. That cuts off about a mile.
Yeah.
Right? A lot easier to get in and into there from Crescent Drive.
It is, yeah. Just near that. That's near the bridge at that point, yeah.
What else?
So that's one of them. The other is something that is near and dear to me here, and it's right in the San Gabriel Valley, are the free lectures that are offered at Caltech in the evenings.
Oh.
Not every evening, but approximately once a month. There's two of them. One's called the Watson Lectures, and one is the von Karman Lectures. And they are, they're advertised online. I mean, you can read about it. Just Google those. So the Watson Lectures is maybe over kind of the 8 winter months, not counting the summer. Usually in the summer, both of these things. And then those are on Wednesday evenings. And then the von Karman Lectures are on Friday evenings.
Those are completely open to the public?
Yes, they're free, open to the public, no admission charge. And what's so exciting to me about them is that the speakers are usually from Caltech or JPL, but they're world-class personalities. I mean, they're world-class authorities in what they're talking about. I mean, it's very diverse. I mean, there's a small history department at Caltech, and we've had historians talking at these Watson Lectures, like on the medieval England, but the invasion of England by the Normans, and of course on science, on Mars, on the galaxy, stars. So it's very diverse. If you're at all interested in science, or even, and as I said, sometimes it's even not science, these are a great way to learn a little bit more.
The subject matter is all online, available to see.
You mean the schedule, the agenda schedule is? Yes. Yeah. You can do that through Caltech. And then a third one?
Yeah.
The third one is what I find absolutely splendid. Maybe it's the most consequential of all of them. Are all the noodle shops in the San Gabriel Valley? It is just, the last 5-10 years, it has just exploded in diversity.
So what kind of noodles do you like?
Oh, Chongqing.
So do you go, you just go out, experiment, you go try all the noodle shops that you can?
We do. I do. My wife and I, and sometimes with some friends, these are, in the in the past, not so much anymore now, but we would go and find different noodle shops and experiment, and some we like more than others. But
so what noodle dish are you craving right now?
It's a very it's the Chongqing noodles, the spicy noodles.
Is it Sichuan cuisine?
Yes, I think it's Sichuan. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that is a very relevant, I guess, choice, just because of the presence of the Asian community in the valley here.
Oh yeah, it's like, there used to be a lot of dim sum restaurants, and they were kind of large and relatively complicated. They're kind of passing on now. There's not so many, but the noodle shops are really springing up, and there's just a lot of diversity there. It's really,
Rob, is there anything on your heart or that you want to inform our listeners about, if they can either help you or get in contact with you, or what would you like our listeners to know?
Well, if they'd like to learn more about some of the climate policies I was mentioning earlier on, they could contact me at Pasadena at citizensclimatelobby.org. So it's Pasadena and then it's just all ones run together, citizensclimatelobby.org. Okay. And that's a group that's behind this bill that's in Congress that I mentioned.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It was fascinating. And we unfortunately couldn't get to all of the interesting stuff. It's just, to me, to have somebody who is so educated able to explain to a simple mind like mine, what outer space is like, and science and the whole discovery, an adventure of discovery. It's all, just exciting. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the SGV Master Key. You can find the full back catalog of the SGV Master Key podcast at sgvmasterkey.com. This show was produced and edited by Russell Mono of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks again for listening or watching. We'll see you again very soon in the next episode.
Nice matter. No, kind of matter.